Welcome to Changing Minds with your host, King of the Broad-Minded Thinkers, Daryl Davis. Presenting guests with original thought-provoking content,
bringing you wider perspectives on things you know, and challenging you with information you've never considered. Tired of the same old, same old? This is the place to be.
Changing Minds.
Welcome to Changing Minds, where our goal is advancing minds, yours, ours, and the world's. I'm your host, Daryl Davis. Today, we welcome Bill Ottman to the show. Bill's a technology entrepreneur who rides the cusp of technological advancements in cyberspace and the world of computers, and how the knowledge of this technology drives social media and society at large. One of the many facets of Bill Ottman has been his long-standing interest in the de-radicalization of the internet in response to hate, racism, anti-Semitism, and extremism. He will tell us about his vision to leverage technology to achieve this well-needed and worthwhile endeavor. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Daryl.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for being on it. Well, let's start with the platform that you co-created and you were the co-founder of, Minds.com. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So Minds is a free open source social network, meaning that we're totally transparent with all of our code. Anyone can inspect or make their own technology with our software. We believe that it's really important for people to see sort of what's going on under the hood so that they can make sure that there's no funny business going on, as we know is sort of happening with some of the big networks. We just believe that open civil discourse is the solution to, countless global issues. Basically, the more access to information people have, the better positioned we are to make informed decisions about any topic. So, that's why we're very committed to freedom of speech. And that being said, it doesn't mean that you necessarily agree with everything you say, in fact, or that you see. In fact, you're going to see many things that you disagree with. But, unless you give everyone a platform to speak their mind, then that's the only way you could ever have people able to change their minds. If you don't give them the platform, if you don't give them the free speech, then they can't ever change.
Right. It has to be a two-way conversation. Now, is this platform, is it open to the public or are there certain mandates, requirements to join?
Totally free to the public. We do have some premium accounts where you can get more video storage and, more website features, but nope, totally free.
Totally free. And, now you're an expert in technology in many other fields. The people who come on to the platform, is it required that they have any expertise or just have an opinion or both?
No requirement for expertise. I think that, expertise is somewhat subjective. I think that we are actually trying to build a system for sort of verifying experts in certain ways where through what's called a web of trust, different users can validate their credentials and basically get scored by their community. So if you have a professor from Harvard and enough people say that that person is a professor from Harvard and that they have these certain credentials, then different users can sort of create more verified identity and expertise. But that's something we're working on right now. You don't need that to join now.
Okay. And my understanding is that the platform currently has, is it true, 2 million members and growing?
Yes.
So when did you first come up with this idea and how did it develop? What was the impetus for it?
The impetus was that all of the major social networks now, obviously many of them are really valuable tools, but none of them share basically the blueprints of how they are built. They're all what's called proprietary software. So the problem with that is that, one, no one else can contribute to building the network because it's locked. Only that corporation has the ability to build on it. Some of the biggest open source projects in the world would include sites like Wikipedia, WordPress, Linux, which is the operating system that basically powers the whole infrastructure of the world. Almost all computer networks leverage Linux, the Linux operating system and server. So when it comes to social networks, which is basically the global communication mechanism, we think that, both for the purposes of global collaboration on the code itself and for the purpose of transparency, we need a global open source social network that is sort of powered by the community as opposed to a small group of people in the corporation. So whether it's the code or the company itself, actually Minds is owned by thousands of our community members. Like, they actually have stock in the company. We did what was called an equity crowdfunding round where our community actually helped fund us. And, that's incredibly powerful. So we're sort of people powered from the sense of the actual ownership, the software, the content. It's open to the public. So we're just trying to be a little bit more community centric than some of the, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Twitters. I think that those networks have certain values, but they are also suppressing speech in certain ways, and they don't share access to the blueprints of their technology. So
for an example, so our listeners who are not, social media experts, behind the scenes, we all are experts to get on these platforms and post something and argue back and forth and so forth and so on. But behind the scenes, as you mentioned, algorithms and things like that. For our listeners who may not be savvy to these types of things, explain the difference of how some of these platforms that you just mentioned work as opposed to Minds.
Basically, when you're on Facebook and you go through your feed, your news feed, the posts that you're seeing on Facebook are decided by Facebook. They have all of these algorithms going on in the background that decide what posts you're going to see or what advertisements you're going to see. And they basically spy on everybody in order to show you relevant content. Some people agree with this, some people disagree with this. On Minds, it's a fully chronological feed. So when you subscribe to somebody, you are going to see their post. Actually, on Facebook and Twitter, when you subscribe to somebody, you do not necessarily see their post. Because they have gone away from the chronological feed and they show you what they think is relevant to you as opposed to just the raw feed of what you have subscribed to. So we think that that's problematic because that is basically putting a restriction on global communication. Because if you subscribe to a news outlet and you're expecting to get the news, but then you're not getting their post in your feed, suddenly communication has been disrupted.
So you're saying that the owners of the platform more or less edit the post and only show you what they think may be relevant to you.
Correct.
Or on the other hand, whatever may be relevant to them that they want you to know.
For instance, different advertisements.
Yeah. Now, so maybe that explains, like, say if I go on the internet and I order something for my guitar from some place, like, whatever guitar company is out there.
Sure.
And then I get on one of these platforms and all of a sudden all kinds of guitar ads pop up on my thing. Obviously, how do they know that I'm interested in guitars?
Absolutely. Facebook and Google are feeding you advertisements based on your location, based on your browsing history. Some people suspect, though this is not proven, that through your microphone. There's a big debate going on about that. It's sort of up in the air, but certainly your location and your browsing history. So even if you're not on Facebook and you're in another tab on your browser, they're watching where you're going elsewhere because they want to feed you those ads.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, anyway, we just think that digital rights, your privacy, transparency, these are things that we really value, and we're not going to spy on people. I think that, some people may say, hey, follow me around, spy on me. But we think that that should be something that the user has to decide for themselves, as opposed to by default, it being the case that you're just getting followed around. That should be a consensual action by the user.
Now, are there no ads that pop up on minds.com or?
We have a feature called Boost, so you can earn more what we have are tokens, and you can use your tokens to get more views on your post, which is an ad in a certain way. So we're not against ads. Ads are just, a promotion, but we are against surveillance advertising. So we're not going to spy on people in order to make our ads more relevant to them. We're going to say, hey, do you want to see boosts about music? And then the user would have to say yes before we would give them that.
Okay. All right. Now you have I guess I would call it maybe a sub-platform to the overall parent of minds.com, and the sub-platform being change.minds.com. What is the difference, and why would one go to one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of minds, our minds are all connected on this planet. And so we have different ways of communicating, online and offline. So to be honest, I think of online and offline as equally important. In fact, offline live may even arguably be more important because it's face to face in real life. But, when we talk about the ways that humans have to communicate, we, are talking online and offline. So Change Minds is specifically focused, well, actually on both online and offline, probably with a tinge towards the in-person conversations. But, Change Minds, we came up with it together, Daryl. This is all about providing people with a platform to discuss all different topics, from music to politics to anything, and evolve our views. I mean, I would like to change my mind in certain conversations. I think that we just want to provide the breeding ground for change.
Okay, so when somebody wants to express an opinion or make a comment or ask a question, which platform would they go to, or does it matter?
Sure. So yeah, if you go to change.minds.com and just click groups on the top, there's a group that is sort of our hub. So that's really where anyone listening, we would love for you to come and join that group and check it out. We'll be talking about politics, race, music, any topic.
There's a group for each topic, or they all are within the same group?
Right now, it's all within the same group, but we're going to be spawning more groups as that need increases.
Okay, great. So it's like more like a TV channel, a TV thing, TV guide. You just go there and pick your channel,
right?
And you can go talk about gardening, or talk about race, or talk about politics, etc. That's where you're leaning towards?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of the topics today, for example, that might be a prominent discussion on Minds. We're in the midst, actually the beginning midst of this unprecedented, uncharted territory called coronavirus, and how it's affecting our country and countries around the world. And it affects each one differently, and the leadership, for example, in this state, in our country, the United States, the leadership of the various states have different ways of addressing it. For example, in Virginia, they just shut down the schools for the rest of the year. In other states, schools are just temporarily closed until sometime in April or May. So it varies state to state, probably depending upon the number of cases that the virus has appeared in. People are getting anxious. They're fighting in the grocery stores and shopping centers over trying to hoard various provisions for their home. Gun sales have gone up. All this kind of stuff. People are starting to tribalize. Speaking of tribalizing, the FBI now reports that white supremacists are figuring out ways that they can take this coronavirus and leverage it to their own desires to exterminate blacks, Jews, and police. That's what they've said their goal is, by filling up spray bottles with bodily fluids of their members who have coronavirus, and then going to areas where these groups congregate and spraying them or whatever. Let's talk about that. How can, and de-radicalization, as we've mentioned before, what can Minds or the people on Minds do to bring about knowledge of that and ways to address it without, getting violent and using a lot of hate speech and all this kind of thing?
My question, Daryl, have you ever heard of anything like that happening before? Sort of the intentional spreading of disease for the purposes of, it's like almost a eugenics type angle. Have you heard of anything like this happening before now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's been tried before with anthrax, for example. Confiscating anthrax, mailing it to people in the U.S. Postal Service, having it appear on people's in people's mailboxes and things like that, where people would touch their door handle, the doorknob on their car, all that sort of thing. So this is not a first for that.
Yeah, I mean, the odd thing with regards to the racist conversation coming up with coronavirus is that, for instance, with the borders, some people are saying, oh, we told you so, we need to lock down the borders. And now, sort of the left and the right are agreeing that we should lock down the borders because it's just a biological fact that disease spreads with the spread of people. This is why we're all even locking ourselves down into our own house. So there is obviously some practical reason to limit travel, but I can definitely see how that's being leveraged by people who just want to end immigration. So I don't know the solution for, people spreading disease intentionally. I mean, that just sort of seems, where did you hear about that? Like what's the exact, it seems like it was probably isolated cases.
No, the FBI just came out with that the day before yesterday. And it's been in the New York Times, CNN, ABC News. Those are the three sources that I saw. There are others if you want to Google.
Yeah, it is. ABC, The Hill, encouraging. Wow, I mean, that is dark.
Well, they've always been predicting what they call RAHOWA, RAHOWA. RAHOWA, which stands for Racial Holy War. In other words, the race war. And they've been predicting this for decades. When I first became motivated to learn a whole lot more about racism and supremacy in our country, I had I'll call it a run-in with the head of the American Nazi Party. And this was in 1974 when I was 15. And he spoke about the race war, the upcoming race war. And he said that their goal was to send all the blacks back to Africa and all the Jews back to Israel. And if they don't leave voluntarily, they will be exterminated in the upcoming race war. These were his words, quote unquote. And then he went on to say that we will know your uniform by the color of your skin. These were words from 1974. And they're still being talked about. They're still being spoken. We last saw it in Charlottesville just 3 years ago. That was ground zero for what some people wanted to start. The race war. It was a soft target. And every time a white supremacist is arrested and busted, and the authorities raid their homes, what do they find? A stockpile of all kinds of weapons, semi-automatic and automatic weapons. And what are they for? They're for the race war. Well, now this coronavirus and anything else they can get their hands on is what they want to leverage to add to their arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, it almost has a relation sort of to a suicide bomber type. I mean, it's not the same because they're not killing themselves in the act, but it's almost like this ideological violence.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't really have suicide bombers. Our mentality does not lend itself to that ideology, unlike, say, some of the Islamic jihadists or some of the, from World War II, some of the Japanese kamikaze pilots. We don't want to blow ourselves up in the process. It has been our practice to go plant the bomb and then run away and detonate it and watch the results. For example, Timothy McVeigh, what did he do? He drove the truck to the Oklahoma City Federal Building, parked it, and then left, and caused the death of 168 people. Whereby in other countries, we've had people drive trucks into our embassy and explode the truck with them inside it, or fly planes into our buildings with the pilots inside it, take boats and crash into the USS Cole and blow it up with the speedboat driver inside it. These are people who are giving their lives for what they truly believe in. We don't have a practice of giving our lives for what we believe in. But if somebody in these groups has contracted or is afflicted carrying whatever this coronavirus, if they are under the impression that they're going to die anyway, what do they have to lose? Or even if there's a cure for it, they're still thinking about you taking it and taking out somebody else, and then going and getting the cure.
So do you find that there's a rift within the white nationalist movement of certain people who are willing to be violent and certain people who are not?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Is it a minority, or RAHOA? Is that what?
RAHOA, yeah.
Is that adopted by a large number or a small number?
It's adopted by a very large number. And, but there are those who don't want to see it come to that. You have in that world, you have what are called white separatists, and you have what are called white supremacists. And just to differentiate, a white separatist believes that we all can coexist, but separately. Blacks and Jews would have their own neighborhoods, their own workplaces, their own schools, playgrounds and et cetera, restaurants and whatever. And whites would have their own. And so therefore there is no need to mingle or miscegenate or invade each other's spaces, whereby a supremacist is just a step further over the line, where no, this is a white man's country. Everybody else needs to go. This is our homeland.
But that concept sort of, would you agree, applies to ethno-supremacists in every country of every race, that there's sort of this distinction? Or do you find that white supremacists, white separatists versus black supremacists, black separatists versus Asian, you don't hear about that much, but I'm sure they exist. Do you feel like it is more heavily weighted in the white population than other races to have sort of supremacist groups?
I've been in 57 countries around the world on 6 continents, and the worst I've seen is right here in my own country. Different forms of discrimination exist in other places. For example, you take a country that is predominantly white, like, say, Ireland, over there in the UK. What is their beef? Well, their beef exists between Catholics and Protestants. We don't have that situation here in this country. It doesn't matter if somebody is a Catholic or a Protestant. We don't even ask. We get along fine, all right? We don't go and bomb their churches and shoot at them and things like that. It's a very serious problem over there. They have removed all trash cans out of the subway system, which they call the tube over there in the UK, because people were planting bombs in the trash cans because of this IRA and the Sinn Féin and this rift between Catholics and Protestants. I was in Poland maybe 5 months ago, and to give a lecture and a performance, and as I'm a musician by trade. But over there, they're seeing a rise in nationalism, and with their beef are the Ukrainians. And so I was having dinner with some people, and this lady was telling me, she's not a nationalist at all, but she was explaining the situation in her country. And I said, well, I pointed to a table across from me, and I said, well, can you tell me if those people over there are Polish or Ukrainian? Because they look just like you. And she said, no, I cannot tell by looking. I said, well, then how do you know? How do you know who to discriminate against? And she says, well, you hear it in their accent and their voices. If they speak Polish, they would have a Ukrainian accent, or you'd hear them speaking the language in Ukraine. So you have that. In Israel, what do we have? We have the Jews and the Palestinians. In Lebanon, it's the Muslims and the Christians. In other places, it's the Arabs and whoever else. So this tribal thing is global. It's not in every country, but one thing that no other country has had in recent times. When I say recent, we're talking dating back to the 1700s, 1800s, is slavery. We have a history of slavery, of bringing millions of people over here from Africa and enslaving them. We're not talking about indentured servants, which a lot of Irish people had to go through. We're talking about slaves. And our civil war in this country was fought over slavery. And you still have people who are still trying to fight that war, even though they've lost it. You see these T-shirts with rebel flags saying, and baseball caps with rebel flags saying, the South will rise again, and all this other kind of stuff. And we have all these reenactments at a lot of the battlefields, Gettysburg, Manassas, places like that, Sharpsburg, where these wars, these battles were fought during the Civil War. Every weekend, if the weather is right, there are reenactments. And some of these people take that stuff seriously, whether they're wearing gray or blue. It's very interesting. Now, to answer your question, so then, even after the North won the war and slaves were freed, they still did not have a place at the table. All right, because what became then was another form of slavery, of confining people to their own restroom, their own water fountain, their own back of the bus, or not giving them admittance at all, because I don't want black people eating in my restaurant, or I don't want black people staying in my hotel, or coming to my theater, and things like that. So we were enslaved in another way called Jim Crow. Other countries don't have that, so or don't have a history of it like we do, 400 years. So our brand of tribalism, racism, tends to be just a little bit different.
Yeah, I was looking at an article about modern slavery, and I think that it's obviously quite distinct from slavery in the U.S. But you do see things, with sex slavery throughout Europe and Asia and Africa and Latin America. And there's actually what's called forced begging, where all these children are basically forced to go beg, and then they bring the money to sort of the master. And right. There's, also these different factories, different industries do sort of have a little bit more unofficial sort of trafficking. Human trafficking is sort of still pretty, it's a big deal still.
Right. People are definitely enslaved around the world in many different aspects. Mm-hmm. The Lost Boys of Sudan, things like that. Okay. But here's the difference. Okay. What you're talking about, human trafficking, sex slaves, and all this other kind of stuff, that is illegal. In our country, slavery was legal. This is my slave. You want to buy him? I'll sell him to you for $100.
Absolutely.
And we sold slaves on the courthouse steps. Where do you go for justice? You go to court. And on the courthouse steps, we separated families. We took kids and sold them to one plantation and sold the mother to another plantation, the father somewhere else, to the highest bidder. Okay? Other countries don't, you can't go to any country and see some advertisement for, hey, you want to have sex with my kid? No, because that's illegal. They'll end up in some kind of trouble.
Right. That's a really important distinction. Have you spent much time in Africa?
I spent 10 years in Africa.
Oh, nice. Living. Where? Oh, cool.
Ethiopia. I lived in Ethiopia 4 years, Ghana 2 years, Guinea 2 years, Senegal 2 years, and visited many countries in between. And what a lot of people don't realize, especially over here in the U.S., is that Africa is not a country. It is a continent.
Right.
It is a huge continent with many, many different countries, and each country is different from the next. And within each country, there are different tribes of people and different languages. Because it's funny, I'm so embarrassed when somebody, that I consider to be intelligent and knowledgeable or whatever, when I would come back from Africa or whatever, and someone would say, do you speak African?
Oh boy.
What's that all about? It'd be like me asking some white guy who's visiting from Germany, do you speak European?
Yeah, it's a sort of lazy clumping together of so much diversity and difference in culture. But you really, I think even almost the fact that Black people are labeled African American as opposed to their specific heritage. I don't know, because so often in conversation, people refer to Africa. Africa gets referred to with a frequency that is, people don't really say North America. You never hear that.
Right. Well, and I will give you my opinion on that. But right before that, when I was a kid, because see, my dad was U.S. Foreign Service, so that's what took me over there. Initially as a kid, he would be assigned to different countries, with the American Embassy, and after the assignment was over, 2 years or whatever, you return back home to the States. You're here for a few months, and then you get reassigned to another country overseas. So I would live in Africa and Europe and different places. But when I was a kid and I'd come home and go to school, and people would find out, that I'd visited Africa or I lived there for a while, my fellow peers, talk about little kids, they would ask me if I saw Tarzan. That was their perception of Africa. And yes, while there are, wild animals and safaris and huts and different things, that we have seen in the movies, they don't see the tall buildings and the industry and things like that do exist in Africa.
It's just media manipulation, quite
precisely.
frankly. Yeah,
precisely. Now back to your question. We've had a lot of names over the years, over the decades, as to what we want to be called. We know we don't want to be called nigger, but what we have been called, we've been called Negro, we've been called colored, we've been called Black, we've been called Afro-American, and now the term African-American. Also the term people of color, which includes anybody who's non-white, non-Caucasian. Personally, I have two thoughts. I don't use the term African-American. I have two thoughts on that myself, and I'm speaking from a personal perspective. I'm not a spokesman for anybody else. But to me, the term African-American, two definitions. One definition is that even you're a white man. You are an African-American, if you want to get right down to it. If we want to go back to the first form of human life ever found, it was, they named the fossil Lucy, which was found in Ethiopia. So if that's where human life spawned, and you're an American, you are an African American. If you were from Taipei, you would be an African Chineseman, or an African German, African whatever. So if you want to go back that far, that's the original definition. But to apply it more modernly, to me, an African American is someone who just got here, maybe last year or a couple years ago or whatever, and they've become a naturalized citizen. That to me is an African American. But when you've been here like I have, for 400 years, as a descendant of slaves, I'm first and foremost an American. If you want to describe my color, you can say Black. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with the term Negro. I have no issue with the term colored. I take issue with the term Afro-American or African-American. Not that I'm disavowing my heritage. That is my heritage, and I'm happy of it. I'm proud of it, whatever. But it's not an accurate reflection because we all are from Africa. You don't call yourself a Euro-American.
No, you never hear that. Yeah, that's a very honest interpretation. I mean, sometimes it seems pretty silly. Like, actually, you'll find some outrage in, this new sort of cancel culture that we live in, where if people or person of color is the politically correct term, but colored person is
right.
not. And it's just inverted
confusing
language.
And that tends to shut down conversation because people, in their interest of trying to be politically correct and not wanting to step on anybody and, ruffle somebody's feathers, they feel like either they have to walk on eggshells or just, shut down altogether and not talk to that person out of fear of offending them. But, I look at it like this. We had the Negro Baseball League back when blacks could not join the regular baseball leagues, okay? One of the first was Jackie Robinson, but he was part of the Negro Baseball League. We have the United Negro College Fund. You have the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP. These organizations are not going to change their names to the National Association for the Advancement of African American people or people of colored people or whatever. It is what it is. We didn't have a problem. We named those things. We didn't have a problem with those names back in the day. Why is there an issue now? Now I can tell you what it is. See, you have a history that you can relate to. What kind of name is Ottman?
It is, it's a mix. Prussian, German, Scottish, okay. Dutch.
Okay, so you can go to Russia, you can go to German, you can go to Scotland, and you can find some Ottmans over there. And if you dig back far enough, you probably will find some of your relatives over there. They may be removed, but they still have some of your DNA. Mm-hmm. All right? And how do you find them? You find them through your last name, Ottman.
Right.
All right? My last name is Davis. Davis is a Welsh name, all right, from the country of Wales. And when I've played in Wales, Davis over there is as popular as the name Smith over here. And when I've played concerts over in Wales, when I was on tour, I would ask, my audience, hey, are there any Davises out there? And half the people start screaming and waving their hand, I'd say, hey, cousins, that kind of thing. But, I cannot go to West Africa where my ancestors, boarded the slave ships and find people named Davis. So I have lost my history. I've lost my connection other than my skin color. I don't have that connection, you see, to go find my roots. So what people over here are doing, people being black people, they create something that gives them a semblance of belonging, Afrocentricity. Okay, even a lot of people are mistakenly think that the celebration of Kwanzaa is African. It is not. It is not. Kwanzaa was created by a fellow named Ron Maranga in California, based on some things that he created that have a semblance of Africa. If you remember back in the late 60s and early 70s, black people wore their hair in this big thing, which was called an afro. That had nothing to do with Africa. That was not invented in Africa, and nobody in Africa wore an afro. Like I said, I lived there 10 years. I lived there during the 60s and 70s, and nobody wore an afro. And when an African did wear an afro, it was because he or she was imitating a black person in America.
So when did the word Afro emerge for the hair?
In the late 60s.
So was it during the time when it was a popular hairstyle and it was sort of But was it to claim that sort of like black people with afros wanted to call it an afro so that they could have that connection?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And and they would wear the kente cloth and the dashikis and African style clothing and things like that. And then Ron Morange created Kwanzaa to give them something, and a lot of them didn't even know that it's not African.
Well, the funniest thing about Afro is that you could hear that term, and honestly, I think I'm almost guilty of this. You don't even associate it with Africa. Like you just hear the term Afro and you think of the hair. The
hairstyle. Yeah. Well, yeah. I know a lot of, or I knew a lot of white kids and guys who would wear afros. It became something popular. Now, sometimes they wore it simply out of rebellion. Not that they want to be African or anything like that, but just like the hippies, they rebelled against the establishment. The establishment was, a nice clean cut, no hair on your face, that kind of thing. So what do? They grew beards and grew their hair long.
Right. And some people's hair just naturally turns into that shape.
Yeah, exactly. And, and it could be that somewhere in their history, maybe even going back to slavery, their ancestors might have been doing some of those things.
So what's the positive? Let's talk about some positive elements of maybe what this whole virus disaster is. I mean, it's almost like it's leveling the playing field. I mean, now it's just like humanity is humbled. We're all sitting in our houses. We're all, no one's above anyone else when it comes to the threat of a pandemic.
Well, you're speaking from a logical standpoint, okay? And from a logical standpoint, yes, no one is above that threat. But unfortunately, there are plenty of people, especially in this country, who don't believe it is as serious as it is. There are people who are saying, "Oh, it's just something to cause you to act this way," and da 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 da. Even our own president, a few weeks ago was calling it a hoax, and all this kind of stuff. When we've had information that it's coming since January, and here we are unprepared. It beats me, and now he wants to open up the economy in a couple of weeks when schools are closing for the rest of the year. And the worst has yet to come. It boggles the mind how people cannot see just because they are not affected by it yet, and hopefully they won't be affected by it. Hopefully their parents or their friends or work associates are not going to be affected by it. It's not my desire or wish to say I hope somebody knows somebody who's affected by it. No. It's a terrible thing, but just because you don't have it does not mean that it doesn't exist.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it is very true that everybody is not reacting in the same way. Some people are taking the proper precautions, staying home so that they don't spread it more. Other people are still partying on the beach. Trump is pressured to reopen the economy because he's probably having people come to him and saying, hey, listen, if you look at the numbers, this thing's not even as bad as the flu. So he's getting pressured to reopen the economy because of all of his other sort of responsibilities. And, but that's a sad and sick decision to have to make. Oh, that's the only X number of people are going to die. Therefore, I'm going to open the economy. That's not a position that I would want to be in. That's a very scary position.
It's not a position that he has to be in either.
Right.
He's the president. He's our leader. He's supposed to be respected, etc. Then he needs to, to show that to the people. There won't be any economy if people keep dying.
But from a philosophical or even empirical standpoint, I mean, the prospect of getting to zero cases is it's probably not even possible. So the question is, if you have to pick a number to how many cases are an acceptable number of cases to reopen the economy, I mean, that is a conversation. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I mean, we're only at the very tip of the iceberg with this thing. We don't have enough information on it whatsoever, even though he, being the president, thinks he does. He doesn't. He simply does not. I mean, I remember when he first came in, he was saying, he knows, the generals were saying one thing and he was saying the opposite. And his claim was that he knows more than the generals. And then now, the doctors and CDC are saying this, and now he knows more than the doctors.
Absolutely. I mean, he seems incapable of just humbling himself before experts. He always seems to have to act as if he knows all the answers, when this is the classic case where it's, this is a disease. This is a medical issue. The only doctors are the ones who have the answers.
Exactly, precisely. If I was sick, I'm damn sure not going to him for treatment. Okay. You also have to consider that this is election year, and his second term is up for bids, in a few months. So, if people are not working, they're out of jobs, they're not making any money, people are going to foreclose on their house or whatever. These are things, opening up the economy, might win him a few more votes, especially if you're out of money. So, that's also a factor.
You have that, but then actually I've been seeing some, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but there are actual deaths that are occurring because the economy is shut down. So because people are losing their jobs, so there is a lot actual physical harm being caused from that end of the debate as well.
What is the COD, cause of death? Talking about suicide, depression?
It could be because someone wasn't, I remember when the George Washington Bridge got shut down by some, I forget which politician decided to shut it down. And it turned out that someone died because the ambulance couldn't get across the bridge. So it's like when you shut down infrastructure, I don't have a specific cause of death, but when millions of people lose their jobs, that could cause people to slowly, it could cause so many unintended consequences, which I think is a valuable part of the conversation. I'm not saying that means open up the economy, but it's still something to be aware of.
Well, yes, I think every facet, every side of the coin or situation, should be looked at and studied and factored into the final decision. But I don't know of any situation where people are dying more at a higher rate from losing their jobs than by being afflicted by these diseases.
I agree, but if you lose your job and lose your house, and I know there's all these mandates going around, like you can't evict and whatnot, but the reality is that people are losing their livelihoods and their resources, and that has all kinds of disasters that come with it.
That is a reality, and if you remember back in 2008, the economy tanked and crashed, and people lost their homes. The banks foreclosed. People had upside down mortgages and all kinds of stuff. Unemployment was up. All kinds of stuff. But you know what? We weathered it. We got through it. And people. Some people are still paying off those those shark loans and whatever else. But we got through it. Yes, some people may have committed suicide, and I'm not discounting that at all. But that's to me, and again, my opinion, is not as serious as a disease that we cannot control. Like, for example, I meet every month with the local police chief, and we discuss racism in the county where I live and things like that with this meeting group. And it is especially relevant when a black person gets shot and killed, and it turns out they were holding a cell phone, or they weren't holding anything, holding their wallet or whatever. Where a white person gets to go home, gets arrested, or goes to jail, or goes home, but the black guy goes to his grave, and it turns even if he was a criminal, or even if the white guy was a criminal, blacks are being treated differently by law enforcement through racial profiling. If the guy was holding a weapon, my question is, why not, shoot him in the leg? If he's holding a knife, shoot him in the leg. Make him go down. But police, or at least in this county and almost across the board here in this country, they are trained to shoot at center mass, which is your chest area, because that will kill you. That will end you. All right. So when they do not pull your gun unless you intend to shoot, and when you shoot, you fire at center mass, and that is all their training. They're not taught to shoot you in the hand or the foot or the ankle or the shoulder or whatever. When my father was one of the first black secret agents in this country, and back in those days, you fired warning shots, and then you shot at the person, and you would shoot them in the leg or whatever. You only shot to kill, if you really had to. I asked, in one of these meetings, why not fire a warning shot first? And then if the guy doesn't comply, shoot him in the arm or the leg or whatever. Well, the police answer to my warning shot was, and this was just within a year ago that I asked this question. Well, you fire up into the air, the bullet has to come down somewhere. And it may hit an innocent, bystander, somebody walking down the street, something like that. Well, I'll tell you what. How many people have you heard dying from getting hit by random bullets falling out of the sky as compared to people who died from being shot by the police? So that's my argument to deaths by the economy as opposed to deaths by some pandemic.
Yeah, and I just found a HuffPost article that says Trump claims U.S. will see more death by keeping economy shut down than by coronavirus, pointing to things like suicide. So, but that I don't buy that, but I do buy that it can't be an indefinite, like you sort of have to have an acceptable number. Otherwise, the world is going to, I don't know what's going to happen on this planet.
I got that. But you remember the last time people committed suicide in en masse, if you will, and did all kinds of crazy things was back. You remember when Orson Welles did that thing, that hoax about the economy? Well, you don't remember it because you weren't born then.
No.
But
I vaguely understand. I mean, yeah, I don't think that there's not going to be mass suicide.
well, there was back then. He got on the radio. He was a radio.
Oh, I did listen to that, and it was fake. Yes, that was amazing, right?
Right. People jumped out the windows of their office buildings and all kinds of crazy stuff. People have learned since then. This is not what you do, and we didn't have that happening in 1972 during the gas crisis, where you could only buy gas on certain days of the week if your license tag was odd or even. I remember that because that's when I first started driving, or in 2008 or during the Bush administration when the economy tanked or whatever. We got through it. We didn't do these mass suicides. And furthermore, we can't, yes, we cannot go indefinitely without knowing where we're going. But in order to know where we're going, we must first know what we're dealing with. And the problem is we don't know what we're dealing with. We've been told all kinds of things since the beginning of it. Like I said, we've had information on it that it was coming back in January. And when the president first talked about it in early March, because he neglected it for 2 months, he called it a hoax. And then we're told by doctors and other quote unquote experts that it goes after older people whose immune systems are shutting down anyway because they're aging, and it goes against people who are sick, people with diabetes, the people who are most not prone to getting it are kids, because their immune systems are strong, they're resilient, they're healthy, etc. And now, guess what? Kids are getting it. So that just blew that right out of the water. So what I'm saying is we don't know enough because it keeps changing. It's very similar to AIDS. I remember when AIDS first came out. just like people were trying to call this virus, the flu. We called what was AIDS, or what would become known as AIDS, we called it pneumonia because it showed some of the same symptoms. It wasn't pneumonia, but it showed some of the same symptoms. And I had friends, I had school teachers who died from AIDS, but on their death certificate, it said pneumonia, or in the newspaper, it said pneumonia, complications from pneumonia, because we hadn't named it yet. We didn't know this epidemic called AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, HIV, all this stuff. So that, then finally we realized, oh, this thing does exist. It's very serious. And then in retrospect, we realize, hey, you know what? That person did not have pneumonia. That person died of AIDS. So we're learning a whole new thing. And just like right now, where we are giving misinformation because we don't know, we did the same thing when AIDS first came out. At first it was said, you can only get it from homosexuals. You can only get it, or you can get it by sitting on a toilet seat. You can get it from shaking hands. You can get it passing somebody on the sidewalk and they breathe on you. All kinds of wild and crazy notions of how to get AIDS, and you had to stay away from homosexuals, all that kind of stuff. You shouldn't use somebody else's needle, if you're going to shoot up with drugs. You can get it at the dentist's office, through the blood when he works in your mouth. Some of these things are true, but a lot of them were not true. And it seemed like when AIDS first came out, every other day we were getting different information and some conflicting. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, right now the most important thing is to sift through all of the information and disinformation, and we just need to understand what's going on. We just, and patience is probably a virtue right now, as it usually is, so that we can make the most informed decision.
Indeed. So what can we do on minds.com and changeminds.com to give people a sense of normalcy, a sense of belonging, a sense that they can contribute to spreading goodwill and having communication and conversation civilly while we weather this storm together? Because as we know, these types of diseases and viruses do not discriminate. They don't discriminate upon race, color, ethnicity, religion, persuasion, etc., wealth, whatever.
Well, we're all home, or most of us, and so we're spending more time on the internet. And so, definitely anyone out there, let's start a coronavirus conversation, and let's try to sort through the information, or and any topics that you've heard us discussing. Let's grind through and find out what the answers are, because in the age of social media, the truth does tend to gain traction, and also disinformation can gain traction. So, we have to be careful. But I think that the influencers on all social networks are trying to find out what is going on, and some people are making mistakes. But one thing that I will give Trump a little bit of credit for, not in this virus, but there's plenty wrong with how he tweets, just unfiltered. But I think that in a way, he is addressing the internet and engaging with the internet in a way that no other president has. And I do think, I want to give him the benefit that if the right information gets to him, that he's going to make the right decision. I think that he has pressures coming from many different angles, obviously, to reopen the economy. And, so we need to try to get the right information to him and to people who are decision makers all around the world. So, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, I think, is just important, because, the president, it doesn't matter if you like Trump or not. I think that because the decision makers are the decision makers. And so, right, we have to deal with that, and we need to try to influence the decision makers.
Right. I mean, nobody should be disrespectful of that office or whatever. But yes, you're right. But he, at the end of the day, he is a king. He thinks he's a king. He's a president, and presidents serve the people. People serve the king, and that's the difference. And in this country, we don't have kings. So yes, he is the decision maker, and we have to deal with that. And we deal with it by providing the right information, and hopefully encouraging him to make the right decision.
Yeah, you can only hope.
Yeah, but I don't give up on hope. But when the right information is provided and the right information is not heeded, then those people need to be called out on it.
Agreed.
Okay, because I tell you what, there's a difference. Some people think it's synonymous, ignorance and stupidity. In my opinion, those two words are not synonymous. For me, an ignorant person is someone who makes a bad choice or the wrong decision because he or she does not have the facts or does not have the proper information. If you provide them with the facts and proper information, you have alleviated their ignorance and they can make a good choice or the correct decision. A stupid person is one who has the facts, who has the right information, and still makes the wrong decision. So an example that I'll give you, let's say I paint the walls of a room, and I don't post signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. Therefore, anybody coming into that room is ignorant in the sense of being unaware that these walls are wet. And they go and they lean up against one of the walls, and now they got paint on their clothes because they didn't know. So I could fix that ignorance by posting signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. I can stand in the doorway and tell each person entering that doorway, hey, gather around the center of the room. I just painted these walls 10 minutes ago. They're still wet. So now everybody has the facts. Everybody has the right information, and they gather in the center of the room away from the walls, except for one person who takes it upon himself to go lean against the wall. And now he wants to know, why is there paint on his clothes? It's because he's stupid. He had the facts, he had the right information, but he ignored it. So fortunately for us and for anybody, there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education. Unfortunately, there is no cure for stupidity. So Mr. Trump must make up his mind. Which is he going to be?
Yeah, because some people just don't want to be educated. And regardless of if the information is coming to them. But gosh, Daryl, we're in such a precarious situation because, it seems you look left, you look right, you look at Biden, and he isn't really even able to communicate clearly. He seems to have some sort of mental, I don't know, he's getting old. A lot of the things that he says just don't even make sense. And so I feel like you look at Biden, you look at Trump, and it's like, wow, neither of them really seem to be ideal. And we just, I think, need to be taking more individual initiative to create the change that we want to see. We can't be expecting politicians to solve our problems. And I think what's exciting about social media and the internet and the ability for regular citizens to have immense impact is that we can. And you can, look at a candidate like Andrew Yang. He came out of nowhere and became, he was on the debate stage. And that was just a really totally grassroots. So I think that's exciting to me.
I think you just formulated a good topic for bringing people onto the Minds platform for a discussion. And that, and I would encourage all of our listeners to go to minds.com and change.minds.com and join the conversation. And, we talked today about the coronavirus. We talked about white supremacists trying to leverage this disease to further their mission of eradicating Jews and blacks and the police being the government as well. And Bill just brought up an excellent point of look at the candidates that we have coming up in the upcoming November election, where he feels that no one really has it all or makes a lot of sense. They're growing old, they're not on point, etc. It's a very good point. And I think maybe a topic of conversation that we can bring onto the platform would be, what do you, the listeners, want to see? What are the factors you all want to see in a candidate for president? I think with 2 million and growing followers, I think we should be able to nail down the prototype. And there is that person out there somewhere. It might even be you, Bill.
Who knows? But, and this has been a really fun conversation. I mean, I don't claim to be an expert in these topics. I think that what I do feel confident about is being able to sort of sort information and, providing a platform for the information to flow. I mean, I think that we're just so inundated with information and content and different opinions. Everyone's trying to sway our opinion when you look at the computer screen. And so I would say whether you're on Minds or whether you're on another social network, like the biggest takeaway that I can offer is to just try to approach every information that you receive as objectively and calmly and rationally as possible, and avoid getting, I think being emotional can be valuable in certain regards, but when it comes to information that you're receiving on the internet, I think that we want to kind of desensitize ourselves and just try to stay calm in all the madness, because media is inherently trying to convince you of something. The media that I tend to trust more, and I trust very little media, is media that is telling me to do my own research and telling me almost not to trust them, but to take that information for what it's worth and move on. So,
well, as Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but not to their own facts. So before we go, let's talk about, if you would, some of the guidelines for civil discourse on Minds. What is appropriate? What is not appropriate? That kind of thing. And we're here to protect free speech. And how do we do that? Even if it goes into hate speech. So enlighten us on that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, so I think within the group on Change Minds, we're not going to be dealing with people who are just trolling and being totally disrespectful and spamming with, all of their sort of volatility. I think that, on Minds as a whole, the policy is that as long as it's legal in the US and as long as it's not harassment, then it can remain on the platform. I mean, I'm open to your thoughts here, Daryl, but I tend to think that we want people who are approaching the conversations on Change Minds with, a certain degree of civility. We can't just, if we're going to be productive, then we can have totally different opinions. But when we start doing like personal attacks, I don't know how productive that is.
Right. I agree 100%. I think, everyone is welcome to their own opinions, and we encourage them to bring it, regardless of what it is, even their own ideologies. But let's discuss those as though we're trying to enlighten the other party about the history of why I believe this way and what facts I may have or why my opinions are more relevant, etc. As a means of enlightening one another. We may not agree at the end of the day, but also, a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution.
Absolutely. And, to play the other side of the coin, for whatever ideology you hold, I would say your best chance at convincing somebody of your idea is to be respectful. The chances of from probably even an empirical perspective, the chances of convincing someone by screaming expletives at them and, just being totally disrespectful. I have to imagine that the rate of conversion of ideology is close to zero with that strategy.
Right. Let me tell you something about that. There is a movement and a saying, punch a Nazi and all that kind of thing. I have some former neo-Nazi friends. Some of them, even tour with me when I give lectures on white supremacy, and they come out and tell their stories, etc. And they have said, punching a Nazi in the face or whatever, may be a feel good moment, for the puncher, but never have they seen in all the years that they were a neo-Nazi or white supremacist. Never have they seen one of their members or themselves get punched in the face, and that caused them to convert and leave that ideology. All it does is further radicalize them and further reinforce that ideology with them, because now they're under attack.
Yeah, it's just a lazy approach. I think that it's an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. That is a very true statement. And so, and honestly, the most interesting conversations.
You know what? I didn't mean to interrupt you there. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. It's true. But to counter that, the late, great Ray Charles had said, everyone should be blind for 5 minutes because he would see more than anybody with eyesight. So true.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, the best arguments, whether it's from some sort of ethno-supremacist or from an anti-racist or Antifa or left, someone on the left, someone on the right, it's just not intelligent. It's not bringing our consciousness up to, be getting nasty. To be honest, I don't think that expletives are actually, it's about context. So if you use a certain swear word, like you could use that actually in a totally scholarly context, or like you were saying before, the word Negro doesn't even offend you. So it's actually not about the word itself. It's that if you're just lazily, spraying, word vomit all over a comment thread, just being nasty, it's like, okay, first of all, it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of everybody's time. And, some people get a buzz off that, but I think that that's okay to exist on the internet, but we're trying to have a productive conversation. And we want to get to the heart of the best arguments of racists, because I think that hearing their best arguments is the only way that we can actually understand these people. Because I mean, Daryl, you know this better than anyone, but I mean, some of the more intellectual in the supremacist crowd, they're smart.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was actually just watching an interview have you heard of the book Rising Out of Hatred, The Awakening of a Former White Nationalist, about Derek Black?
Yes. Yeah, Derek Black was the son, or is the son of a Donald Black, who was David Duke's right-hand guy.
Yeah, my wife just read that book, and we watched an interview about him, and he was saying, and Megyn Kelly was interviewing him, and she said, "So did your parents use the N-word often?" And he said, "Actually, no, they never used that. That was considered lowbrow to them, right. And that was so surprising to Megyn Kelly because, she didn't imagine that there could be sort of a higher intellectual type of racist.
And you see, that's because the media has had a lot to do with that, with influencing what we think, what we see, how we perceive people. Because, one's perception is one's reality. And when you see shows like Geraldo and Jerry Springer, and all you see on there are these white supremacists whether they're Klan or neo-Nazi or whatever else, alt-right, throwing chairs and yelling and screaming, that becomes your perception of what they are. These are low-level third-grade dropouts, who pump gas at the gas station or something. Yes, there is that stereotype, no question about it. I know them. But there are also doctors, there are lawyers, and college graduates, and members of the KKK have gone from third-grade dropout all the way to President of the United States. And President Warren G. Harding was sworn into the Ku Klux Klan in the green room of the White House. President Harry Truman, before he became president, Harry Truman had joined the Ku Klux Klan for a short time. He did not like it. He got out and went on to become president. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black was in the Klan at the time that he was appointed to the Supreme Court. He had to leave the Klan in order to sit on the Supreme Court. Senator Robert Byrd, who just died a few years ago, was the oldest living senator from West Virginia. He was a Grand Kleagle in the Klan in the 1940s. Grand means state, Kleagle means recruiter. He was a state recruiter for the Ku Klux Klan in the 1940s. He later denounced that ideology, but he was a U.S. senator. We've had governors, police chiefs, as I said, presidents, all kinds of people with high education, high intelligence and intellect, who have a twisted sense of ideology. And these are things that we don't see because we watch the ones on the Jerry Springer show, which they bring on certain ones to raise the ratings. You see people throw chairs and yell and scream at each other, and have to have the bouncers come up on stage and separate them. But that's why Megyn Kelly was unaware, or caught her off guard when Derek Black said that.
Yeah, and I guess my final note would be, I am fascinated by the data with regards to censorship, but also, the whole debate about genetics. And because this is the area where a lot of white supremacists go, talking about genetics and IQ and these controversial studies. And this is sort of what convinces them, many of them, to sort of adopt this ideology. So I think the direction to go is, let's share all of the studies that exist, debunking the IQ thing or upholding the IQ thing. I mean, I think the IQ thing shows that Ashkenazi Jews and Asians are the smart, but that's a taboo topic, and so, and probably for good reason. I don't think that it's a productive thing to go too deeply into, but I think that if we're going to get into the heads of the people who believe that, then we have to talk about it to a certain degree and find out the information with regards to genetics that debunks this, because ultimately data should be able to debunk the rationality of racism.
We all know that race is a man-made construct, number one. So that in and of itself should debunk, racism. We all are the same race. Yes, we as human beings try to differentiate between blacks and whites and Asians and Hispanics and whatever else is out there. But at the end of the day, we all are the same race. We may be different species in that race.
Right. Yeah, you shouldn't. I agree. You should not need data to show you not to be racist. You would hope, Daryl. You would hope. But I think that unfortunately, some people, are sort of caught in between, and they feel like, they may want to, for instance, if you ask somebody, would you procreate with someone of another race?
And I've asked that question many times to people.
Some people would say no, but do you think that automatically makes them racist if they prefer somebody of their same race to have children with?
It depends upon you know, you give me that example, but I don't know the context.
Right.
Okay. I've asked that question many, many times. Back when I was writing my book on the KKK, I would ask Ku Klux Klan leaders that same question. You know, what would you do? You know, if your daughter married a black guy or whatever, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they just go off.
Mm-hmm.
Now their answer would be they would not accept it. They would not like it, and then they would ask me, well, you know, how would you feel, you know, if you had a kid by somebody other than your color, by a white person, you know, that kid is going to catch hell from black people, and that kid's going to catch hell from white people. Why do you want to put that kid through that? And I said to the guy, I said, you know what? The only hell my kid would catch is from people like you.
Right.
You know, I say, why do you want to put my kid through that is the question. All right. Not, you know, those kids are just as intelligent as anybody else. And perhaps maybe even more so.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, if you want to look at dogs, you know, police, when they get their dogs to train, whatever, they've done studies. The best dogs for that kind of work are mixed breed dogs, not a purebred. Mixed breed dogs are able to train a lot better, and things that they understand a lot better. You know, their training.
Absolutely agree. I mean, you know, but the eugenics movement that Hitler abided by, and that many ethno-supremacists do abide by, there is sign. I mean, like with dogs, when you breed dogs, you can breed dogs for different traits. And so if certain people are trying to create certain traits, I mean, obviously with the type of person that you were talking about, I think that's, you know, not, I agree with your response completely. I like that, you know, if they're worried about how people are going to react, it's like, oh, actually you're the only person that is going to react poorly. But for
Right.
people who are actually, you know, trying to breed dogs, or they want to have kids with X trait, racism aside, I think that, you know, everyone has preferences.
Yeah, so, I don't have a problem with preferences, okay? Yeah. And I'm going to create a new word right now, okay? We've talked about racists, supremacists, and nationalists and all that, separatists, but I'm going to create a new word. And maybe we can have a discussion about that new word on minds.com or change.minds.com. My new word is preferist or preferentialist, okay? A preferentialist or preferist, same thing, is not a racist, all right? It's somebody who prefers something. So let's say, for example, if I were to say let's say I'm single, I'm out dating, I go on some dating site or whatever to find somebody, or go to wherever, you know, people go to, the bars, whatever. I prefer, let's say, a blonde. Okay, or you're going to fix me up with somebody on a blind date. And I said, well, look, Bill, you know, make sure she's a blonde. I don't want a redhead or a brunette or black hair or whatever. I want a blonde. That does not make me anti-redhead or anti-brunette. It's just what I prefer. I prefer a short woman or a tall woman or a fat woman or a thin woman. You know, different men prefer different things. That is my definition of a preferist. However, and it does not mean that I'm discriminating against those others. You know, I may like them just fine. You know, we can be friends, we can go hang out, you know, whatever. But if I'm going to get involved with somebody, then it should be somebody that I prefer, all right, to be involved with. Somebody that attracts me, that turns me on, that gets my motor running or whatever. However, that does not preclude my having associations with those other people.
Right.
Now, if I say to you, you know what, I want nothing but blondes in this company.
It's pretty extreme.
Yeah, and we need to get rid of all the redheads, send them back to wherever they came from, put all the brunettes under a rock and whatever else. That's no longer a preferist. That comes into the realm of supremacists or something.
I'm happy to propel the term preferist into the lexicon. I think that's a great word, and sort of provides a bridge between those two different types of scenarios. So yeah, because I mean, you even see a number of scientists getting in trouble recently. Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, for sort of engaging some of these topics. They would be great people to get on the podcast with you. I'm sure they would love to have that conversation. So yeah, anything else you want to hit on, Daryl?
Well, I think you mentioned something a moment ago. That would be, you talk about using words that might cause somebody to get offended or upset, things like that. As far as on the platform, like you said, the word Negro. Like I said, I'm not offended by it. I don't have a problem with it, and I think that would be a good topic for conversation. Another thing would be, suddenly this coronavirus is now being called, thanks to our leader, the Chinese virus. I disagree with that. I don't disagree with the fact that it came from China, but that was not what it was originally named. If it had been originally named the Chinese virus, just like the Hong Kong flu or the Spanish flu or something like that, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But when you name something and then down the road you decide to change it in order to assign, he thinks, or he's telling you he's assigning origin, but he's actually assigning blame. And I think, that's a subliminal way of poisoning people towards certain things that he wants to regulate.
Yeah, and I think that context with regards to use of any word or term is real, and intention is really what matters, because whether it's Negro, that means black in Spanish, or Negro, and Blanco, it gets silly when we just cast out words just because the word was used, but it's pretty damn obvious when someone is using a word with a specific intention. So to be honest, you could use a made up word and have, the wrong intention, and it could be just as damaging and hateful and racist than, the actual word. So I think intention is really the core of what we're trying to get to with the conversations that we want to propel. And as long as people are in the conversation in good faith and with the intention to bring us to, a better place, I think that's the goal. It's really clear when people are trying to derail productivity.
And on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, Bill, for being on the show and bringing these great perspectives to our listeners.
Thanks so much, Daryl. That was really fascinating.
Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Daryl Davis. We'll see you all next time on
Changing Minds.